We have the Nissan Leaf Plus, which has 280 miles of range. And then the regular Nissan Leaf only has like 80.
Yes.
That's a lot, 130. But it's
So it's cheap.
you can drive it as far as you want. You just have to charge it. And that's I think maybe where the bigger problem is,
Right.
is within the network and how it's designed, electric vehicle charging infrastructure isn't there quite yet, and it's taking a really long time to build it out. Then we have like other yahoos that are doing things like cutting the cables to try to steal copper out of them, and that is a whole other.
Oh, like lighting or something.
Minneapolis has it too, and you're going to be seeing probably in another 2 months a massive amount of theft notices if you follow like crime watchers and things like that. The thieves have been stealing parts of air conditioning units as well.
Like residential.
So you're going to be seeing a whole bunch of people filing claims soon because we haven't turned our AC units on since last year. And now when the heat hits, you're going to see the claims on that. Minneapolis has also been getting hit, ironically, really bad. They've been literally taking the entire light pole and cutting the light poles up into metal salvageable sections where they can trade that in. So Minneapolis Public Works is actually being hit harder than St. Paul is with copper wiring thing.
Wow.
Okay.
And then they're cutting our cables just for fun. But
What is it? How do you stay on this? Through what?
unfortunately, I mean, this program is owned by the city of St. Paul and partnered with Minneapolis.
Okay.
So when they are cutting our charging cable, not ours,
Oh.
the city charging cables. So as taxpayers, you're paying for that.
Yeah,
every
and
time
you
we fix it.
because you're right.
Yes. So we had to work on there was an article that came out, I think it was in January of this year, where we had to partner with the sheriff's office and everything else regarding all of the theft. And this is linked to all the same things like catalytic converter theft, the cutting of cables, the ripping out of street lights, and then now in Minneapolis, like I said, you're seeing air conditioning units come up as a theft issue, and it's really working on the cities on their own who pass the laws to require recycling companies to not allow them or require certain conditions. But when you have an entire truckload full of those materials, what's to stop you from driving in Wisconsin or North Dakota or Iowa?
Nothing.
So that's where we're trying to work again with Senator, not just us actually, everybody's trying to figure out how do you make this into an entire countrywide initiative, and if you go too far, then you're beating up on the poor, like the individual guy that runs his own shop or things like that, so.
Come on, Jake, let's go forward.
Sorry. I was explaining the price, things get very fully closed now.
Okay, Felix, we're ready, I guess. Hi, everybody. Small crowd at the moment, but we got a lot of people online. I know I have friends who are tuning in. There's many others also. I'm Bryce Hamilton from the Farm Committee, and we're going to hear today about shared car rental, about HOURCAR and Evie. As you know, or most of you know, we have two stations off to the side of the building here that I've seen being hooked up in the past, and people are getting the vehicles are being filled with, electricity. Anyway, we've got James Vierling, and he's the head of growth, marketing, and communication for HOURCAR, Evie, and he has a BA from River Falls, and then he also has a MS. And I want him, if you would, say just a little bit about this in sustainability from Blekinge Institute of Technology in Sweden. And I looked online to that, and I found out that their basic aim, it says, is to change the world for the better. and it's all through kind of, environmental focus, ecological emphasis and all. They're doing quite a bit with a lot of students from Ukraine also, which I'm very interested in. But anyway, this program, HOURCAR and Evie, has an interesting history, and we're going to hear about it. Okay, give a little round of applause for James.
All right. Well, hello. Thank you for having me. Yeah, I think as Bryce mentioned, I guess this is a little bit of my history and my background. I kind of stumbled into the transportation world by accident. Retail world, I was a store manager at Walgreens for 6.5 years, and got burnt out by that, which was it's very easy to do in the retail world. Came in the transportation world. I worked for a company called Car2Go, which was a for-profit division of the company formerly known as Daimler, now known as the Mercedes-Benz Group. I'll show you a picture of those if you don't remember them. Partnered a lot with Nice Ride Bike Share while they existed here. And then after Nice Ride, I went to Sweden, got my master's degree there, where I wrote my master's thesis on public transportation in the South Baltic Sea region. And that was a whole nother fun topic I can dive into if you want. Came back here, COVID hit, and then I heard rumors about this thing with this nonprofit HOURCAR, who I had known about before, launching this entirely new service, if you will. It was based on the framework of Car2Go, and so ironically got to jump in that, and here I am today. I'm going to explain a little bit about what Evie is, but before I can tell you about Evie, I think that there's a little bit of value if you understand a little bit about the transportation system and how that works at a really high level. So over in this part, I'll explain a little bit about the frameworks and how Evie got started and the entire recipe, if you will, of what had to happen before for it to exist today. And then I'm going to highlight a little bit about HOURCAR, the company that I work with now, and they're the operators of the entire system. I'll explain a little bit about what Evie is so you can understand or have a better idea about that. And then I'm going to highlight for you all something that we just announced last week, which is our community impact and the money and the way that we're saving and changing people's lives here in the Twin Cities. So the foundations and the beginnings of how we are today, you're going to see, and I picked this photo specifically. This is when HOURCAR started, and this is when the Toyota Prius was cool. It's cool. It was cool, right? And the photo is hilarious because, like, who just sits out the side of a car door? And it was back when the Prius was in high demand. It was when a hybrid was a whole new technology. It was a whole new idea. And so HOURCAR originally consisted of all Toyota Priuses. They were hard to get at the time. And when I say all, I think we had maybe like 16 vehicles, so it wasn't really that much. So with that, so quick highlight, and it's really weird. I was just telling Bryce how weird I still think that this is new. If you still say 2000s, I'm like, oh, that's still new. And it's like, no, it's not. So 2004, we had the Blue Line that opened, and it's weird to think that it happened in 2004. In my head, I always think we've just always had it. But the Blue Line opening really was a big step for the entire area. After that, we're going to look at in 2005, HOURCAR was created as a service under what was then called the Neighborhood Neighborhood Energy Connection, the NEC. They merged with the CEE. The NEC created another another program called Eureka Recycling, if you've heard of that before. So they were kind of a big think tank, if you will, of what they were doing. In 2010, again, I was telling Bryce this earlier, as Minnesotans, we do really great things, but we're really bad at promoting that or highlighting or boasting ourselves. And so Nice Ride launched in 2010, and those were the green bike share. We, along with Denver and Washington, D.C., all three of us launched America's first bike share model in the same year. Nice Ride got more funding and got more equipment to be able to launch as the official largest bike share service in America. We didn't highlight that. So that was a really big step going forward. And then Metro Transit the same year began construction on the Green Line because St. Paul's a city and they still exist. I say that because we're in Minneapolis. Additional foundations, so the fun story I can tell you about this, Car2Go in 2013 launched. That was when I got involved. I was their marketing person at Car2Go. The story of that really quickly is R.T. Ryback, who also helped make Nice Ride, he was visiting in Paris and saw bike share and was like, I want that. And everybody was like, R.T. Ryback was just gone one day. And he just jumped on a bike and rode around Paris in bike share and said, I want that in Minneapolis. So he helped get Nice Ride. Same thing with Car2Go. He was in a conference in Austin, Texas. This is the story of it. I don't know how true it is. But he was in this conference in Austin, Texas and said, we have this really cool thing called bike share, and this is why Minneapolis is great. And the mayor in Austin said, well, we have that. It has 2 more wheels and a motor, and we call it Car2Go. And so he again said, I want that. So he created what was called Car2Go as a 2-year on-street pilot and brought it up here. 2014, Metro Transit opens the Green Line. Uber and Lyft, if you remember, it's kind of, again, really weird to think. They were operating illegally. They were getting towed if you had an Uber or Lyft on your car. And so that was when that also became legalized a year after Car2Go launched up here. And then Car2Go expanded into St. Paul. The weird part, again, as Minnesotans, we don't boast about it, that was and still is the largest global free-float car share system ever. So nobody else had ever been 110 square miles. That's a crazy huge footprint to operate in, but that was a whole nother initiative that happened that year. In 2015, again, I'm gonna pick on St. Paul, the mayor tried to put parking meters on Grand Avenue in St. Paul, and that resulted in a borderline comic revolt of people, if you will. And that's another part of the Evie Carshare story and how it got here. Again, in 2015, Minnesotans, we don't boast about this at all. We were the only market that we have ever been able to research that actually had 5 car share operators in the same system. So the idea of renting a vehicle on demand for an hour or a minute or whatever you want to consider, we had 5, which is absolutely crazy. Vancouver in Canada is known as the car share capital of the world. They only had 2. So the idea that we had 5 was absolutely bizarre. And then I also put in here that that same year is when investigators from the government started researching the Volkswagen diesel scandal. And for those that aren't remembering of that, Volkswagen said that they had a clean diesel vehicle that wasn't hurting the environment, that was really good for people, but they put technology in the cars to lie to the emissions. So when your car went in, it reported way lower emissions than what it was really doing. And that resulted in about a $15-ish billion fine from the federal government that almost bankrupted Volkswagen. But that's where the funding came from for the Evie Carshare program. Not all the funding, but most of the funding. And then in 2016, Car2Go reduced the home area. I can explain a little bit about that if you want. But we went from 110 square miles down to 70. And then later on that year, as we were talking before most of you got here, Car2Go ended up closing due to the fact that officially we stated it was due to the state taxing, which was at 23%, which is high. But the real truth is that technology was changing and the cost of updating the system was also a heavy bearing on what was going on there. But ultimately, before Cargo left, they were able to advocate and get the cities to remove the pilot program away and legalize car share into law. The idea and the easy framework to tell your mind, nowhere in the world has it ever happened before that a for-profit company walks into a city and says, we want to pay for all of your parking meters. It's a bizarre idea, but that's what Cargo did because parking meters and parking were included in their service. And so that was brought into the regulation and into the laws of the city. And so that framework here legally already existed. So with the loss of Cargo in 2017, HOURCAR as a service under the NEC became its own nonprofit and started using the work of what's called the Shared Use Mobility Center out of Chicago into actual processes and working here in the Twin Cities. So in the Shared Use Mobility publication, it was highlighted that free float car share was considered an essential need in the Twin Cities area. But it wasn't serving the communities that it should be servicing because it was at a 22% sales tax, which made it way too high for low-income and disadvantaged communities to pay for. So our now CEO, Paul, went into the cities and said, hey, why don't we take the findings of this report and actually do something with it? And so people were like, oh yeah, we should probably look into that. At the same time, what I did not put in here, the city of St. Paul had, and I believe Minneapolis, Mayor Fry and Mayor Carter were both just elected into office, and Mayor Carter in St. Paul had created a new position that hadn't existed before, which was a Chief Sustainability Officer. And that was where St. Paul City Council member Russ Stark moved into that role and wanted to really start to build his own framework and function into that role. Adding to that, if you want, R.T. Ryback, when he left as mayor, he said, I brought Nice Ride to Minneapolis, I brought Car2Go, and now I'm leaving. And so he viewed Nice Ride and Car2Go as his legacy footprint on the city. Similarly, Mayor Carter is viewing the EV Spot network, which I'll highlight, which is part of Evie Carshare, as part of his legacy on leaving his imprint on the metro. Similarly, and I can highlight a little bit more about Nice Ride, they unofficially closed the St. Paul market that year. There was a lot of politics involved with that. And then ultimately, as you all know, 2 years ago, Nice Ride finally closed here. Additional steps in this are going to be, sorry, this is really small. Yes, okay, so the EV Spot network began community engagement, and then COVID hit, and that kind of took a nice little negative spin on that part, but it started to develop, and that was the thing. We had received a lot of grant funding to launch the EV Spot network, and that what was originally called the Twin Cities Electric Vehicle Mobility Network got rebranded, thank God, into what is now called the EV Spot network. And at that point, yeah, we finally got the funding. We were able to start ordering vehicles. We were able to start doing things. In 2020-21, we received our first shipment of 101 Chevrolet Bolts, which are all-electric vehicles. They're made here in the U.S., but again, things get political. They're not made of 100% U.S. parts, so the vehicles are technically leased under grant funding by law. But those arrived. EV began to work. We initially did what we called a pilot launch of the program because we had the Chevy Bolt. At the time, they were built with battery by LG that was somewhat randomly defective. As far as they could tell, when we did the math, only 22 bolts had started on fire due to a charging issue. And when an electric car starts on fire, you can't stop it. You just have to let it go. So we had to pause the pilot program for a couple months, which actually turned into a really good win for the company, and I can share more about that if you want. But we kind of caught the attention of GM, and they became a funder of the program, which is really great. And so we got the Bolts. The Nissan Leafs finally started to arrive the year later. Again, the Nissan Leafs, we had ordered 75 of them. Nissan accepted the fleet order and then was like, we can only give you like 22. And then we're like, no, we need more. So that's why some of the Nissan Leafs in the service have a higher range. We were able to get those on the first order. And then they said, well, we have to finish out the rest of your order with a lower range battery. And so we got 2 more shipments of that. So it's taking a while to get the entire network up and going. Last year was really the first year that we've had all the vehicles and all the systems going. So it's taking a while to get this up and running. And so with that, Evie officially launched on Friday the 13th. I said, why not? Nothing else has worked. It's there. And we launched that at the St. Paul Union Depot. And then beyond that, you'll see that Nice Ride closed, and that's been kind of a hard hit. The cities are learning what happens when you rely on either for-profit or when you rely on nonprofit to not have enough funding to operate on. If you take advantage of the service, if you will, or if you rely on it without actually promoting it or funding it, it'll go away. And so the Twin Cities are learning that very quickly, and we're now becoming a model of actually like at a very global proportion. We're hitting things at a very high level, which is great. But people are looking at what we're doing here. How do we bring these services back? How do we promote biking? And how do we promote car sharing, car-free lifestyles? But then on top of that, how do we also address some of the wrongs in our past of, you can look at our transportation network, and I'll show you HOURCAR's footprint where we are now. It's based along light rail, rapid bus lines, things like that. But those are built around some deep level of historic racism and things like that. And so we're trying, as we're trying to fix things and right the wrongs, we're trying to do it the right way. And that's what's making us a global leader right now. But again, because we're all Minnesotan, we don't really know how to promote ourselves and tell people that. So beyond that, Evie's fully operational and it's up and running. Evie is technically owned by the city of St. Paul in partnership with Minneapolis. I can give you some of the fun story on that if you want. But it's operated by local nonprofit HOURCAR, which is who I work for. HOURCAR is the nonprofit. We've been here since 2005. We kind of know what we're doing, but we've now sourced a lot of talent from not just within the HOURCAR org. Again, like I've worked with Car2Go, the free float service that was for-profit. I also worked at Nice Ride. We have 3 other employees that we brought over from Nice Ride when they closed. So we're bringing a lot of that talent in-house so that we can make sure that we develop the system in a way that it just doesn't go away as the rest have. So again, sorry, that's St. Paul. And this is a Nissan Leaf that's on the highway. So our car is built around what's called hub-based car share. So the easy way that I always tell people when I market it is hub-based car share is like living at home with mom and dad, where you say, can I borrow the station wagon? I need it Tuesday from 5 to 7. I'll bring it back. I'll put gas in the tank. It'll be clean so mom won't get mad. Evie Carshare is more like riding a bike. So you can bring it here, you can leave it there, you don't have to bring it back. It's more of a childhood system if you want to compare it that way. So you can leave your bike at your friend's house and some other day you'll have to bring it back. So in the map of HOURCAR hubs, you can see it's really based around density and also around high rapid transit lines. We're about to announce, so you can all get a sneak peek about this, we're about to announce partnering with Metro Transit in the Gold Line, which is going eastbound into Woodbury. So again, we're partnering hub-based car share with high-frequency transit lines. The problem is, again, like I said before, our transit system is based around, a lot of it is based around density, but there's a lot of, well, yeah, you can say racism. But when you look at like the background and how our transportation system has evolved, it's really based around high wealth communities and along that sort of a line. So HOURCAR, which you can see here, is based a lot around the green line and around the blue line. We're working to fix that. So that was something that was how the funding existed. If you remember the picture before of the 3 white kids hanging on a Toyota Prius, we're trying to fix a lot of that stigma and really bringing a lot more of a community voice into how our services are being developed. So HOURCAR right now operates with 75 vehicles. We have a combination fleet, which is going to include things like what we call an ICE vehicle or an internal combustion engine, so gas-powered cars, if you will. But it covers the cost of gas and or charging. We now have electric vehicles in our system, and we pay for the insurance. So nobody likes insurance shopping, and if you do, we'll find you a help group. We have a variety of vehicles, so you can pick an SUV, a hybrid, whatever you want to do. The majority of our trips stay within the metro area, so most people really don't care what type of a vehicle they're driving, because most people use it for simple things like grocery shopping. Our service really took off during COVID because transit lines were being cut back. People had to go to the doctor and didn't feel safe being in public, so they would drive one of our cars if they didn't have one to be able to go to the doctor and things like that. You can book as far as 6 months in advance with HOURCAR. Again, that's the living with mom and dad model of saying I need it next week or 3 months from now. And then beyond that, we're working, part of our initiative as we're trying to correct some of the wrongs, we've partnered with Xcel Energy, and we have a program that we call the Multifamily Project, which is where we're putting electric charging infrastructure with Xcel Energy in low-income apartments. And therefore, we're plugging 2 of our cars, and then there's 2 regulars. And I can explain more about electric vehicles if you want to learn more, but the high-level viewpoint is that electric vehicles have fewer parts, and fewer parts means a lower cost of maintenance. So therefore, electric cars, outside of the convenience of a gas car and being able to fuel it up for 5 minutes and keep going, electric cars have a lower cost. And so we're working on developing that into the network. Evie Carshare is going to be a bigger example of how we're trying to introduce the newer technology, if you want to call it that, of electric vehicles into low-income neighborhoods. Those are the neighborhoods that typically are last to experience newer technology. And so we're trying to leapfrog, if you will, or jump over some of the traditional historical backlog issues. So the multifamily project is working to install more vehicles by 2030. We are looking right now at adding 10 more sites this year. You can kind of see, you may question why we have odd hubs like way down here or way over here. That's part of that project. Those are the low-income buildings that we're working with in that neighborhood. We're now trying to refocus that and bring it back more into the urban core, because the real truth is how do you get to Bloomington or Richfield or St. Louis Park without a car? You really don't. So those are already car-centric places. We're looking at bringing it back into the urban core where people don't have a car because there's a lack of affordability or a lack of availability or a lack of parking, convenience, other things like that. So again, HOURCAR, we have what we call the Access Plus plan, which is, as far as we've done the research on, we are the only provider right now in the world that allows people to do what we call self-certification. So you don't have to submit documents to us to prove that you're poor. You can just check the box and say, I'm a low-income person, I qualify for these rates. We've also strategically decided to not partner with other programs like what you'll see with Metro Transit because they don't really advertise those programs. They're not really well known. And so we didn't want to partner with a program that people didn't know about already. So we just developed our own system where people can just check a box and say, you know what, my household income is below this amount. I can qualify for these lower rates, and we just let people do that. I can share more if you have questions in the Q&A. I know some of the text is small, so some of you are squinting and trying to read. So with that, we have HOURCAR. Now we have Evie Carshare. And so that was part of the result of what I was describing before, with the findings of Car2Go coming and going, with NiceRide NiceRide wasn't failing at the time of all this research, but we knew NiceRide was changing. My only year of working there was the last year it was a nonprofit, and then they were bought out by a company called Motivate, which was then bought out by another company called Lyft. Minneapolis may know that word from Lyft and Uber. You're trying to maybe kick them out, I don't know. Evie Carshare is now operating in St. Paul. It's their headquarters. And Minneapolis initially wasn't really on board with it, but then was like, oh, if St. Paul has it, we have to have it too. So, there's a small ego going on. Yes, it's a little bit. And so how Evie works, it's a free float system, or what we also call a one-way service, and it's 100% free float. Other systems out there in the world operate on what's called a semi-free float. So there's, if you want to consider like island hopping, you have to go from this location to that location to that. We are entirely free float, so you can leave it at any legal parking space as long as it has a timestamp of 2 hours or more. So with Evie, you find it, you drive it, charge it if you want. You don't have to. We would like it if you did. It gives more charge for other people. And then you just have to park it. And that's really all that you have to do. This is, sorry, St. Paul, I know. This is where it is on the app. Then you're going to select the car, and then you just say reserve it, and then you book it.
All of this is on the app.
All of it's on the app, or, for fun, you can also go into any library, any system out there. You can find them online. You can't reserve it online, but you can sync your Metro Transit Go-To card, and you can walk up and tap it on the window and unlock the car. So that was along.
Accessible to financially strapped people.
That goes into a politic thing again. So the cities still believe that low-income people don't have a smartphone, and that's an old stigma. Most do. I don't know how you live anymore in the US without having a smartphone. The real truth is that it comes down to actually the elderly that don't really know how to use a phone as much. And then the other reality is that some people that are on like a prepaid plan may run out of data. And it's really common if you look at cell phone usage. By the end of the month, you'll see that texting is more popular than phone calls because you're out of minutes. And that still blows my mind that we still have like minutes. Like, it's just weird. But it's still a thing that exists. And we also hit the reality too of sometimes cars are in either a poor service area, or I can pick on really easily a problem like Twin Cities Pride at Loring Park. You get 500,000 people there. The cell phone towers can't tolerate all the demand. You can still call and text, but you don't have data. And so in that area, people will use like a go-to card. So yesterday or 2 days ago, there was a big article about how Minneapolis, how did they word it? Minneapolis had attracted so much talent that more and more people are now visiting downtown Minneapolis for major concerts and shows and sporting events than really almost anywhere else in America. And so the cell phone towers are designed to hold some sort of a control level, but not that much. And so that's what you're really seeing. The problem also that I should share is that cars are no longer cars. So in the world of technology, a car is a mobile phone with 4 wheels that you ride in. So they also operate on the same towers that your phone is using. And so the go-to card is kind of a nice way for us to kind of override or skip a big part of that system. And that was part of a grant and co-partnership that we had with Metro Transit back in 2015, 2016. We got funding to integrate them together. The payment systems are not at all linked at all. But essentially, it just allows you to have one less card in your wallet or one less fob on your keychain. Or any of you that do a lot of like local shopping, they pull out those rewards cards and they have 1,000 of them on there so that they can get the discount. It's to remove a lot of that kind of a burden. So the EV home area was designed around in urban resource planning. A lot of these terms essentially mean the same thing in the Venn diagram of overlaps, but there's slight differences. So you'll hear the term LIDAC, which is a low-income disadvantaged community. You'll see with the Met Council, they use the term ACP, or an area of concentrated poverty, also essentially the same thing. You'll hear disadvantaged communities, you'll hear areas of environmental concern. Those areas are often linked to low-income and or BIPOC neighborhoods. You'll hear the word BIPOC too, Black, Indigenous, people of color. That's all. There's like 4 other terms with that word. But essentially the EV home area and how it got its shape is focused around areas with bad air quality, which tend to be low-income BIPOC neighborhoods where factories exist, things like that. And so we were able to get enough funding to do what we did, and this is where we landed. Ironically, the city of St. Paul had a surplus that year and was able to contribute more money into the project, and therefore their size of the area is bigger than Minneapolis's is. We still kind of sort of joke inside that Minneapolis doesn't really know that we exist, and so if you want to reach out to your council member and tell them, that would be great. But this is the home area as it is now. We're looking to be expanding. We received funding this year, but it was announced last year from Secretary Granholm, who oversees the Department of Energy, that we were going to receive funding to expand further into the east side of St. Paul. When we get questions from people like, why is Seward and Longfellow not included in this? They don't hit the requirements of low income or BIPOC populated. So it's where it is, in theory, it is a great neighborhood. It is an area of a lot of people that would support this initiative. There's just too much money there, and there's not enough diversity in that area to hit that budget. We are trying to apply for funding to be able to expand into that area, but this initial round was really focused on the low income and the BIPOC categories. Evie, again, was focused around community feedback, so we connected with residents in those neighborhoods, well, until COVID said we couldn't do that anymore. But essentially, it allowed us to create individual plans that fit well for those neighborhoods based upon what they required or they requested. So within Evie, we focus mostly on either the Everyday plan or the Access Plus plan. Again, the Access Plus plan allows for low-income people or low-wealth households to be able to check a box and say, yep, I fit in that category, and I can drive with a lower rate. Again, we include with the Access Plus plan what we call the Plus benefit, which removes I call it the deductible, but everyone tells me I can't call it that, the damage fee waiver. So if you get in a crash and then you're at fault, we waive that cost. So it's not on you to pay that high deductible or that high cost. Even at these rates, it still puts us at one of the lowest cost systems, which again makes us one of the most studied right now. We're soon going to be announcing a really big partnership with the Rocky Mountain Institute in Colorado to be able to dive into what we're doing and if this entire system should be considered going forward a municipal requirement. Which would mean that you don't have for-profit coming in here anymore and, well, in theory, making money. Carter really didn't until the final year. But it would allow for this to be viewed as a new requirement within municipalities, the same way that buses and light rail and transit are now. So we're working on that. It's a really fun thing. Things take time. And I guess we'll see. Again, I was telling Bryce, everything in my world is now political, so we will see where this goes. The real truth is that if this initiative, where we got all this funding, a lot of it came from the Volkswagen diesel scandal, and there were federal laws requiring where that money had to go, which was clean air initiatives. Since Volkswagen polluted our air, we have to fix that. So the entire EV Spot network is operated with Xcel Energy, using only renewable energy from wind sourcing. Yeah, so we're working to fix a few things. All of that funding, ironically, came out of during an era, again, don't want to get political, but if we could do this funding during the Trump administration, we can do this really with anybody else. This was during the time where the EPA was being gutted, laws were being changed, the word climate change had to be removed from all government websites. It's really weird to think that that existed, and it wasn't that long ago. So if this can happen during times like that, really anything I think can happen going forward. And so that's why this is really being a really big case study being done, not only in just the US, in all of North America, and many parts of Europe are even looking at this model and saying, how is this working? And they're waiting to see how it plays out. And that's where I get to go into the fun part with you all. So last week we announced our community impact report. We're pretty excited about some of these, and I can nerd out and tell you more if you want to know. But high level, we participated in over 40 events across the Twin Cities, spent a couple hours working with people. We're focusing on multilingual approach, and that's because the Twin Cities, Minnesota in particular, we're a refugee state, not just for different languages, but also for people of the queer community. And so we're really working on how do we make sure that we can connect with those communities that are brought here. We learned the hard way back in the 60s and 70s when we received our first Hmong population here, who were not aware of plumbing and electricity and things like that. We didn't really integrate them very well. We worked a little bit better on that with the Somali population during their refugee state, and now we're trying to really fix that going forward. So the entire program has a focus on working with, well, English, because that's what we speak, Spanish, Hmong, Karen, and Oromo. Those are the bigger languages that we're working with. The struggle, again, with those is Karen, Hmong, and Oromo are spoken. They are not written. And I'll show you an example of our attempt to try to work with that. But even within those communities, specifically the Karen and the Oromo languages, we were told just don't even translate, like don't even try. It's only spoken. So we have our hurdles ahead of us that we're trying to fix, or identify or address, I shouldn't say fix. We work specifically within CBOs or community-based organizations, so we've developed a lot of really good partnerships in that level. We are focusing, again, because our program is focused on righting some wrongs in disadvantaged communities, we're working on connecting with those communities. The struggle is that events in those communities are either really something that we don't have the in-house skill set for. So if you want to say like every year the entire Hmong population gets together, we don't speak Hmong. We have a few Hmong employees, but it's not our place to tell them that they have to go there and represent our entire org. But we're working on getting connected with those events and with those communities through engagement in that aspect.
Do you have Somali as well?
We have Somali. Where we have translators, interpreters. Our two biggest CBOs that we're partnering with are Powderhorn Park Neighborhood Association and the Vierling Community Council. We're about, like I said, we're about to announce the expansion into the east side of St. Paul. And some of those neighborhoods that we're working with and those wards or districts or whatever the right word is for those communities are also going to be heavily involved with us. So we're really excited to be able to do that. I can also highlight, we do have, I mean, the city of St. Paul, their entire city council is on board with us. And that city council, I don't know the full stat on it. I mean, they are all now female and they are all majority BIPOC. So we're going to be working with them to better indulge in that community as it grows. Again, if you want to tell your city council that we exist, we would love to do that with Minneapolis too. So within our community impact, you'll see these are examples of some of our community engagement flyers or knowledge that we've given. Again, even within the Somali and the Karen and the Hmong populations, these don't fully translate as well as we would like them to, but they are an attempt or an initiative to be able to work with them.
You do more like symbolic graphics? Do you know what I'm talking about?
More icons.
Versus even worrying about hearing.
Right, right. We're working on several attempts and several different initiatives to be able to figure out how do we connect best with them. The long and short of it really is specifically within the Hmong and the Somali populations, they're majority now English speaking, which is different than 20 or 30 years ago. So it's really kind of the elders of those population. And what we're already seeing is their children or their grandchildren are translating it back to them. And it's that kind of a bubble. The Oromo population isn't really gigantic. Oh, whoops. I see we're at time. I'll go quick. So we have membership growth at 55%, which is great. And I think probably the final bigger number that I'm giving you is we have a goal of utilization with the cities at 50%, 40%, and 20%. Last year, we're really close to the first goal. We exceeded the second goal, and we exceeded the third goal. So it's working. It's just a really fun initiative. So, yeah.
Well,
Sorry.
I'm sorry we have to end now formally, but anybody certainly can stay around and continue this conversation. This is fantastic. First, let's give James a great big hand. And I just want to invite everybody to join us next week when LaToya Reyes will be speaking on the accountability process for the Minneapolis police officers, which is based on a court-enforceable consent decree to address the discrimination and race-based policing. It should be a very timely and a very, very important presentation. So please come back next week. But stay around and talk to James. This is just a fascinating concept, and I'm delighted to hear how rapidly forward it's moving. There's lots will certainly be in the news, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Again, thanks, James.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
So I've never driven an electric car, but isn't there sort of a learning curve with driving an electric car?
What I can answer for you with that, we did a community-based approach when we did the feedback on the service and the network. The biggest finding that we had is people said, please do not put Teslas in your service. Teslas created a really negative first approach on cars. If you've ever been in a Tesla, there's no buttons. It's a giant iPad in the middle of the car. You can't turn your headlights on. There's no anything really. And it created a thing of Teslas are great for those that want to own one. They're not great for those that want to rent one and figure out how they work. And so with that, we specifically chose the Chevy Bolt is absolutely normal. There's nothing different in it other than, the stick shift is right here. You push the thing. The weird thing that we received back comments on is that people weren't sure if the car was on because it makes no noise. And the other odd part is that people are learning, and this is, I think, maybe where the learning curve comes in, is the charging part of it. And what does that mean? What's a level 2 charger, and what's a DC fast charger, and what does that really mean? How do you drive to Duluth? You have to stop at Toby's and Hinckley and fast charge or rapid charge the car. And I think that's where the learning curve comes in, mostly, that we've discovered. When we initially piloted electric vehicles in our fleet, all of our stomachs were in a knot. We didn't know what was going to happen. And it freaked us out. There was some college student at the U that we think must have had like a learning or something up in St. Cloud, and would take it all the time. And we're like, oh God, the car's going out of the metro. What happens if it dies? How do we charge it? What do we do? Do we have to call a tow truck? What does this mean? It's not really a hard learning curve. The cars are really easy. They developed really well. I think it really just comes down to the charging, and people have to learn that, like, when you stop at Toby's, it's going to take 30 to 45 minutes to get the car back up to 80% charge if you're going to Duluth. But again, that's why Tesla and all the other chargers are putting them at places like Target and grocery stores and restaurants, so that you can go in and have a bite to eat or whatever you need. Ford just announced the other day that they're no longer focusing on what they call the Lightning pickup and the Mustang Mach-E. They made the mistake of trying to go too expensive with their electric cars, and they're now losing an estimated $10,000 to $20,000 per electric car sold because they went so high level with it. So Ford has now announced that they're coming back and building normal, everyday cars for people that are electric. So I think that's the next initiative. I will say that the Nissan Leafs are more normal, if you will. The Chevy Bolts have a lot of torque. So when you hit that pedal, they fly. Like, they go fast. And that's kind of fun if you're the driver. If you're the passenger and you don't know that's happening, it can give you that funny in the tummy feeling. But we really focused on making sure that the cars were as normal as they could be, to get over a lot of that stigma about why you can't drive an electric car.
Is Mitsubishi doing anything in this area?
Mitsubishi, we're partnering. We have 12 Mitsubishi Outlander Sports in our fleet. Mitsubishi is really focused on what's called the plug-in hybrid technology. And we're likely going to possibly consider working with that a little bit closer. The plug-in hybrid technology usually gives about 40-ish miles of electric range. Since the average trip is less than 10 miles from your house, you can drive almost entirely electric on the Mitsubishi Outlander or the Chrysler Pacifica minivan plug-in hybrid. And that's what we're really considering for a potential growth in our next project. We're working with Hennepin County. Yep, and then if the electricity runs out, then you just have gas. So it's there. But yeah.
So I just have one question about logistics.
Sure.
So if let's say I wanted to rent one of your cars, do I have to go to a specific place where there's a charger? And do I have to leave it where there's a charger? Or how do the logistics work?
We operate on an entirely free float system. So you could literally park it at the parking meter right in front of the charger and not plug it in and walk away. You could drive a car down the Target field for a Twins game and leave it at a parking meter that's 2 hours or greater. We pay the meter fees. We pay the event rate fees. So if it's an event meter that normally charges 10 or 20 bucks, we do that. You leave it there and you walk away. So with the whole discussion of like Uber and Lyft leaving the metro area, we solve the Venn diagram of use case scenarios. We fit into that for the most part almost entirely. Where we don't fit is in the area of disabled people, if you're leaving a bar at 2 a.m., and you can't leave a car at the airport because of our service area. But logistically speaking, as long as you leave the car in a space that's valid for 2 hours or longer, no handicap parking, no blocking a fire hydrant, like we don't get to skip any of those rules. You leave it there, you walk away, you're done.
So how do you get the car charged? I don't understand how you do it. Do you have a roving charger? Or
We have like in front of the building here, we have the on-street chargers. There's a green one and a blue one. The green one is for us, the car share, and the blue one is if you own your own. No, anytime, yeah, so anytime that if you end your trip and there's 25% or less range, the car becomes unavailable. So when you open the app, you won't be able to see it. And then our fleet team will go out and say, hey, this car's only got 5 miles left on it, and then we'll bring it to a charger. We've had a few small cases. As far as I know, it's been less than a dozen, where people have driven the car to zero charge. And the joke of that is like when the car gets low on the charge, the screen is yelling at you. Like it's highlights everything. It's like, hey, you've got low charge, stop it, stop it. The next phase of electric vehicles will have built-in technology. Tesla already has this, where at a certain range, the car will turn off the radio, it'll turn off the heat, it'll turn off the air conditioning, it'll not allow you to charge anything, like no USB in your phone while you go, to save all the energy. It'll reduce the torque or the acceleration ability, so you're kind of stuck in like autopilot zombie mode, if you will, but it's so that you can get to the next range. Teslas right now, when you're driving, it'll say, like, to get from here to there, you have to stop at this charger and this one. And it'll say if you don't have enough range to get to the next one, it'll cut a lot of that back.
I still don't understand how you get the cars charged.
Oh,
If I park it somewhere and it's dead, what do you guys do?
we have to tow it to a charger and then we plug it in.
Okay,
Yep.
that was the-
But people get a drive credit, so if you leave it at the charger in front of the church, we give you a $4 drive credit back
I see.
if you leave the car charging.
Does the app tell you where the charging stations are?
It does. Yep. Pull that back up here real quick for you. So you'll see here.